Good morning,
Uh,
Patrick.
Good morning,
Yeah,
committee. Nice to
good
see you
morning.
all.
Good morning. Okay, so we're going to start with Alan Newman, who's going to talk to us about tide amendment, whatever that may be. So, Alan, welcome to
Good morning.
Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. Uh, Tell us what you'd like us to hear.
Well, I think first of all, thank you very much for taking the time. I realize how busy you folks are, and I really do appreciate it. Do you think it makes sense to do a quick discussion of what is Tied House laws and what
Sure.
it's meant to do?
Yes.
Be great.
Tied House laws were put into legislation to protect the consumer from liquor companies monopolizing the sale of their product at bars. Simply put, I really have been a fan of Tied House laws when I saw in England the large breweries buy up all the small neighborhood tavern pubs and wipe out the breweries and put their own brands in. And then in Belgium, I saw the same thing occur. And the Tied House laws are meant to protect that, so that if somebody owns a manufacturing plant, they can't control the sale of other people's products in licensed accounts that they may own a partial interest in. My situation is I'm building a small distillery at an iconic Burlington location called Arts Riot, and I have a minority interest in Higher Ground, which also has a first and third class license. The reason this came up to me at the last minute, I might say, how come I'm so surprised that I got bit by this law? And the answer is relatively simple. I've been in the beer business for about 25 years. The last 10, 15 years, I've been spending more of my time nationally than locally. And over the last 10 years or so, the laws on Tied House enforcement have changed dramatically. On a national level, the feds have said, it's okay if a manufacturer owns a partial interest in a first and third class license account, as long as they don't sell their product to that account, because if they're not selling their product to that account, then by definition, they can't possibly be controlling what the bar is selling. I've been watching nationally, and that change, sent a ripple through the industry. And then I remember back, I forgot how long ago, what was known in the industry as the Bobcat resolution in Vermont, where a brewer fell into the same problem, and the legislature altered the legislation in Vermont to match the federal legislation. But when they did that, they did it for malt beverage only. I unfortunately didn't catch the nuance when that happened. I just made the assumption, again, I was in the beer industry, and I made the assumption that the Vermont was, as it does in many of the liquor laws, was following the federal legislation. And it wasn't until a couple of weeks ago when I was filling out a TTB application for manufacturing that this kind of came up. And that's the history of why I'm late to this bill. But in order for me to be able to continue building out my small distillery, and I'm building a small distillery, I actually see it more as a brew pub, moved into the distilling industry, which is going on nationwide now. We're starting to see, one of the reasons I'm out in LA at the moment is I've always found that trends start on the West Coast, then hop to the East Coast. And I wanted to see what is going on in the world of distill pubs out on the West Coast. And this is an industry that seems to be coming on strong. I've also been paying attention to the distilling industry, the craft distilling industry in Vermont. And in many ways, I'm watching it mirror some of the experiences that the craft beer industry had as it grew in Vermont. And the legislators over the years have aided Vermont's craft beer industry by altering some of the laws to allow Vermont craft brewers to become more successful. And in my opinion, today are one of the great attractions in Vermont to tourism, provide great jobs for kids coming out of college, things that they're interested in, and are providing a fair amount of tax money to the Vermont economy. My concern as I look around the Vermont craft distilling industry is my take is that it's struggling. And there are a bunch of laws that are based on prohibition, that because craft beer has been such a boom in Vermont, the legislature has changed some of the laws to continue allowing that industry to grow. And I'm hoping that the legislators will see that the craft distilling industry, will need some help as it grows. If we want to have a strong craft distilling industry in Vermont, and I'm not talking about large distilleries doing huge amounts of product. It's not practical in Vermont, but to allow these small craft distillers to grow and continue to add the value that the craft beer industry is. I think there are a number of things that you're going to be hearing about over the next couple of years, and to make the minor change. And again, Vermont has already accepted the federal regulation on tied house laws, but it only applies to the craft beer industry. And I'm asking that you open that up so that the craft distillers will have the same advantage that the craft brewers have had, and allow entrepreneurs like me to be able to be in multiple industries without breaking the tied house laws, and in fact, enforcing exactly what the government intended when they allowed manufacturers to have minority interest, as long as they don't sell to the bars that they have minority interest in. And I have said, I'm sorry?
Can I ask you a couple of questions?
Please, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So right now, the law is such that as long as you have a minority interest in higher ground, you cannot get a license to be a distillery at all?
That's correct.
And it doesn't matter what the percentage interest is, it could be 1% that disqualifies you?
My understanding is that it has to be a minority interest. And I'm honestly, Senator, I'm not sure if there is an exclusion for low interest. My interest in higher ground is about 35–40%. So I would meet the exclusion, whatever it is.
Okay.
I can get you the information if you'd like on if there's a minority.
Okay, please do. I'm sure the department probably has that as well. So what you're looking for is your allowance to maintain your interest in higher ground, but are willing to abide by or sign something saying you'll never sell your alcohol to higher ground.
That's correct.
And do you have an intent right now to be more than a brew pub or a liquor pub? Are you planning on selling that alcohol outside of Arts Riot?
To be honest, it's not part of my current plan, but as I've learned over the years, I have an affliction to follow opportunity, Senator, and we're building a very small distillery, so there's not going to be a lot of opportunity for us to sell a lot of product out of there, but I certainly would never want to say I would never do that.
Right.
Have you looked into any concept of like putting your interest in some sort of blind trust or something like that as a possibility?
I have.
And that doesn't work either?
Honestly, I'm not quite sure. It's a gray area. Again, it would be up to the state to allow that, because as the legislation currently reads, I would be prohibited from getting a manufacturing license.
Okay.
Whether or not I could put it into a trust, honestly, I have not explored, although I have thought about it.
You know, on one hand, while this may sound like an archaic, antiquated law from prohibition or something, it does strike me as something we've just sort of replicated in the marijuana law, where we say you can't hold, there's like 3 different licenses. You can't have a vertical licensing scheme where you grow, manufacture, and retail the product. I don't know if there's any correlation there, but we'll hear more. Okay, I didn't want to spend a lot of time this morning. I just wanted to introduce this to us. I want to turn to the department. But before I do that, I'll hear from Senator Clarkson.
Yeah, no, first of all, Alan, thank you for getting up so early.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
It's
Okay.
5:30 where you are, and I thank you very much for getting up that early to testify. I appreciate it. So I'd love to know the term tied house to go back, and we'll research that. But because it's a great English term. So the only barrier to your being able to do this is that Higher Ground has a first and third class license. That's it?
Correct. Correct.
Right. And what was the year that we aligned with the feds on the malt brewery?
Honestly, Senator, I'm not sure. I'd be more than happy to get that information for you.
Yeah.
Claire Buckley, who I see is on, she may know the answer to that.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thank you. It's one of the pleasures of being a legislator is you learn things you never thought you'd ever know.
And quite frankly, one of the oddities to me is I have always been a strong proponent of tied house laws. And when the feds changed it, it really made a lot of sense to me, because it allowed entrepreneurs to operate in a number of different businesses while doing nothing but upholding the tied house law, because if you can't sell, you obviously can't control the sale there. So and again, Vermont's already accepted this concept, but it's limited to alcohol made with malt rather than alcohol made by spirit. And that's really the only change that I'm asking for, to continue doing what Vermont is doing to protect the tied house, but allow the Vermont craft distillers to have interest in businesses other than the manufacturing business.
Thank you.
We're going to get to the department next. Do you want to say something presently, Wendy? I think we can hear from.
Sure. I just wanted to answer Senator Clarkson's question about when that. I believe that was in 2003, and that was what Mr. Newman is referring to, Bobcat. And I happen to know that because Michelle Mahi was the owner, and when he was alive, he was my neighbor. And so, if you remember, in 2003, there wasn't a craft distilled industry in Vermont.
Right.
So that's
Right.
why it says malt beverage, because there wasn't distilled.
So may I just tag on to that, Mr. Chair? So do you think we can't know, obviously, in 2003, if there had been the same level of craft distillery now as there was, if they would have extended it, they might well have, who knows? Our moment is now. We can't go back.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. So we have 3 members of Liquor and Lottery here. Who would like to testify on this particular tied house law?
Patrick or Gary? Are you there?
I am here. I was hoping the commissioner would jump on for this. I was here hoping that you were going to talk about some lottery modernization issues. It sounds like that's not going to happen today.
We may get to that.
You may. That's what I was hoping to be on for.
So no, I had Liquor and Lottery on both this amendment and the next amendment on high percentage or low percentage.
Low. It's the low.
Sodas, and
Yeah.
I wanted to get your opinion on both, but I want to separate them. So I just would like somebody from the department to testify on
Okay.
either the history and preferably their position on this proposal and if it was raised at all in the past, this year or even previous years.
Patrick, are you with us?
Maybe he's having some technical difficulties. I do see his icon there.
Yeah, no, we see him and we don't see him.
I see just his name.
Right, I guess I can start until he can join. Just,
Okay.
we did have a conversation yesterday with Mr. Newman about this. And I have been, it was a bit later in the day and was on to some other things, but trying to explore the options that he mentioned. The blind trust is one that he mentioned yesterday as well, trying to get some legal readout on that from our colleagues at the AG's office, because we don't have an in-house general counsel. So just want to get a little more information about the possibility of going that route. And certainly there are some distillers, one right in Montpelier that you might be familiar with, Caledonia. They have a first and a third class. They're also a manufacturer. They can sell directly, all from their location. So the issue here for, in Mr. Newman's case, is just that he, as he mentioned, he has an interest in another establishment. And so that, that's really the limitation on him personally. But there are ways that the industry is involved in, in being able to serve drinks at their actual manufacturing location. But I'm sorry, I don't have more information for you today. I'm hoping that I'll get to have that conversation with the AG's office and also look more into what percentage. I'm assuming that Mr. Newman had said did not know before, but I knew he had a partial ownership interest, 35 to 40%. I agree with him that would likely put him into the, if he had just a 1% or 2% of small share interest, he probably wouldn't be in the same situation. So I just, wanted to explore both of those a little bit more. And it sounds like you're going to come back to this. So would we have an opportunity to provide answers at that point?
Yes. I'd sort of like to get a flavor before I commit to coming back to it, but it sounds like we will. So I'm just trying to understand the purpose behind these laws is to protect competition. Yeah, I guess I'd be interested in knowing how other states have been approaching this, because I can see the option that Mr. Newman's talking about of, allowing for the sale, but not to the location that he has an interest in. But I could also see some other ways of dealing with it, like the small percentage threshold, which might not work for him. But it seems kind of bizarre that just one location, having interest in one location, shuts down his ability to sell, let's say, in the eastern part of the state. What is the harm there? Have these laws, were they put on the books during Prohibition, and have they outlived their usefulness, or is there still a concern that it's going to? If it's a really minor part of the outside sales from the distillery, do we want to shut that down if it becomes when it becomes, as was described, where basically Alan Newman gin becomes the only gin available in Chittenden County, I can see a problem. But,
Right.
to the extent that it's a small time operation that doesn't go anywhere near where he has financial interest, I'm wondering whether this law is now too broad in its scope.
I
Can
think
you comment on that at all, Gary? Like is
Well,
there?
So
anything
it
else?
was, you're correct. It does go back not to prohibition, but to the end of prohibition. These laws were put in place and they were a combination of this Tide House was a concern because it was a problem, you know, in the industry. And then also the three-tier system was put in place to try to break up these you know, vertically integrated businesses essentially. So they, you know, they provided that that protection. But this, you know, this case is certainly different, and it may be possible to craft something that would be a very minor exemption. I'm still would like to know if there's a way that Mr. Newman can get licensed by taking some action on the other side of his business. But again, I don't have the answer to that yet, and we'll continue to pursue that so that I can give you some information. As I said, I reached out to the AG's office. I just need to have the conversation with them about that.
And there's no way other than a statutory change where this could be accommodated like by a regulation or procedure where you put some guardrails out there and someone comes and applies to you, well, you fall under these narrow circumstances, so this law was not intended to apply to you or something like that.
Well, I think on the ownership interest in this particular case in Higher Ground, that there may be something there that wouldn't require any change, but I just don't, as I said, I don't have the answer to that yet. So I just need some more time to try to see if we can get an answer. I didn't know that until we had the conversation with Mr. Newman yesterday when he mentioned that was at least a possibility in his mind.
Right.
So just been trying to explore that a little further and see if that's a possible solution without having to change the statute. That was the thought there. And if that isn't, then I guess we're beyond to other, you know, to other thoughts, other considerations.
Michael, I think,
Alan and I do have some past history together, and
You do remember.
and I appreciate his comment that, you know, he looks at things and is constantly thinking of opportunities and ways to build better. And so he's sort of a poster child for himself in terms of we need to be careful because we're starting out small, could turn out big. So, but he acknowledges that.
Can I make one comment, Senator?
Yeah.
You asked you asked the question of how are other states dealing with this?
Right.
And again, I just would like to remind you that the federal legislation has allowed what I'm asking, and many of the states just follow federal legislation.
right.
So while I can't articulate how every state does it, I do know that many states, because I've been watching the small distillery industry grow, and so my assumption is that many states have just continued to follow the federal legislation.
So
Right.
the federal legislation goes beyond beer right now.
Yes, it's essentially any alcoholic beverage.
Okay.
Right. And we have Tucker, Michael, Tucker's joined us, so he might be able to find that out for us.
Yeah, I'd be happy to hear from Tucker. We're going to move on very quickly, but from what you've heard, Tucker, have we made any mistakes so far?
We haven't done
Not so far, and I will look deeper into this and get back to you very soon.
Okay. So, Senator Rahm,
Well, I mean, I don't know what we're moving on to, but at some point, you know, I don't know where the commissioner is. We don't know where the commissioner is, but, you know, we do have a new deputy commissioner who I think is trying to get up to speed really quickly and be forward looking in the department. So I didn't know if at some point we just wanted to hear from her about her thoughts as she's.
I was just going to offer before we moved on, either to the commissioner or to Wendy, if they had anything they wanted to add. We will come back to this next week.
Senator Sorokin, I have nothing to add.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Rahm. I'm all set right now, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have on this bill or the amendment for sure.
Okay, good. Okay, we're going to move on to, thank you, folks. The department.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
If you'd like me to stay on, I'm happy to. Otherwise, I'll sign off.
Yeah, I don't think we're not going to come back to this one at this point. So,
Okay.
Alan, it's
Again.
lovely to see you, and thanks again for waking up. And we loved Zoe.
So do I. Thank you very much. And I really do appreciate your time and your consideration.
thank you.
Have a good day.
we're going to move on to, I'm not sure how to title this one, but it has to deal with, I think several members of the committee have signed on to another bill that relates to the sale, I guess, of
Low alcohol.
low alcohol content drinks. Not sure where, because aren't they already sold in convenience stores? I don't know. But yeah, Claire Buckley's here and will be able to enlighten us as to this issue. So Claire, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. And thank you for taking up this bill. My name is Claire Buckley and I work with Leonine Public Affairs, and I'm here today on behalf of the Vermont Wholesale Beverage Association. I also have Jeff Weber from Aqua Vitae, and he's down further on your witness list, but he also is going to address this topic. I'm going to kind of share my time with him. But thank you again for taking it up. This bill deals with a category of products known as canned cocktails. The hard seltzer canned cocktail segment has really shaken up the adult beverage market of beer, wine, and spirits over the past 5 years. And people are really seeking low alcohol, low calorie, more natural beverages that are convenient, and canned cocktails fits that bill. The beverages have alcohol by volume rates in the 5 to 13% range and are often sold in 4-packs that cost about $10 to $12. Consumer demand and innovation by manufacturers has resulted in exponential growth in hard seltzers and canned cocktails, and that's widely forecast to continue. This bill is going to ensure that Vermont can fully capitalize on this growth trend. And I can, and there are, 2 members of the committee who have signed on to this bill, Senator Balint and Senator Clarkson. So thank you for that. But I'll quickly tell you, how the bill changes the law. So the bill adds a definition of low alcohol spirits to Title VII. And though that means an alcoholic beverage containing up to 16% alcohol by volume obtained by distillation, and it also has to be mixed with non-alcoholic beverages, flavorings, etc. The 16% is the same for beer and wine. The bill treats low alcohol spirits like wine. So the law related to the distribution and sale of wine will apply to these beverages, including the 55 cents per gallon tax. All of Vermont's 1,200 licensed independent stores would be able to sell these products rather than just the 76 DLL stores that they're sold in today. And the products would be distributed by licensed wholesalers rather than the state. As for restaurants and bars, on-premise outlets right now go to DLL agency stores to purchase these products. But under this bill, licensed wholesalers would deliver them directly to bars and restaurants. And one thing in the bill is that low alcohol spirits have to be packaged in metal cans up to 24 ounces in size. Anything in glass or plastic of any size, or metal cans that are greater than 24 ounces, would continue to be a spirit and sold by DLL. And the reason for this requirement is because the vast majority of products that DLL sells are in this category of larger containers or non-metal containers. And Vermont would not be an outlier as a control state if it allowed this to happen. There are at least 7 control states that I found where licensed wholesalers can distribute these products rather than the state. And on your website, I submitted a chart summarizing the 7 control states, and they include New Hampshire and Maine. And this issue is being discussed in many other states across the country right now. So I'll briefly going to explain a few highlights of how it would benefit the state. The positive economic impact if this bill were to pass is very significant. Since the bill was originally introduced last biennium, we've had entrepreneurs, the Vermont Retail and Grocers Association, restaurants, craft distillers, and other craft beverage makers, ski areas, wedding planners, and others have come out of the woodwork in support of the bill to grow and expand their businesses and jobs in Vermont. Vermont retailers will be able to stay competitive with border states because right now the retailers in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and New York can sell these products. Vermont craft distillers will be able to sell their products in many more retail outlets, giving them the scale they need to succeed financially. Craft distillers' contribution to the Vermont economy, jobs and tourism, craft distillers' contributions to the Vermont economy, jobs and tourism could grow significantly, similar to the growth that we saw in the brewers over the past 20 years. And again, similar to the issue you were just listening to, a similar change was made for high alcohol beer in 2008, which allowed those to be sold in grocery stores rather than the DLL stores. So there's just another example of how the beer law advanced and the spirit law, is still stayed the same. So low alcohol spirits are best sold like beer in smaller packages and refrigerating. So selling them in grocery stores where the vast majority of beer, flavored malt beverages, and hard seltzers are sold are going to allow these beverages to compete in the marketplace and lead to sales growth for the category. The bill does provide an incremental revenue opportunity for the state of Vermont as the products are sold in significantly more outlets. And all low alcohol spirit beverages are going to be taxed at the higher 55 cents per gallon tax, regardless of alcohol by volume. And I understand that DLL, we have reached out probably almost a year and a half ago to DLL on this issue. And I understand that they are concerned about the loss of state revenue from both taxes and markup if these beverages are no longer sold in the DLL system. And there was a similar concern in 2008 with the beer. But like higher alcohol beer, we urge you to consider that revenue will not only come from these beverages being sold in more outlets at greater volumes, but more importantly, the revenue created by the jobs, taxes, tourism, and economic development made possible by the increase in the access to the marketplace for these products. So I do have, Jeff Weber from Aqua Vitae in Middlebury, who would also like to address this. I don't know if you want to wait for that later, but we would urge you to, pass the bill.
Okay.
And we'd be happy to have additional witnesses and come back, and we're at your disposal with questions. And thank you.
Well, committee, we're going to hear more about this. I think at this point, if we decide to go forward, we would have to make a decision as to whether to pass this bill or to add it to H313. Obviously, if we pass this bill, it has a long way to go in the House. So, Jeff, we're on a very short timetable, but you are here. So if you could take no more than 5 minutes, we'll hear your thoughts on this.
Great. Thank you, Senator. So my name is Jeff Weber. I own Aqua Vitae. We are a non-alcoholic beverage manufacturer. We make a product called kombucha. It's fermented. And I moved from the West Coast to Vermont to start this company. Very early category. We were one of the first companies in the country to get started making this product before it was commercialized. It was a product that was traditionally made kind of at people's homes. It was folk medicine passed around. Nobody had figured it out. And therefore, there wasn't a lot of information known about kombucha. In 2007, I started making it, bringing it to farmers markets. And in 2009, I had a knock on the door from the DLC, and they were investigating kombucha to understand what the fermentation was yielding. And it turned out, much to my dismise, that kombucha could contain as high as 3.5% alcohol. And I was unknowingly selling a product that had alcohol in it, and it was intended for health purposes. So this was very upsetting to me. So we had to quickly figure out how to change our process to make kombucha without alcohol. And it ended in us investing in a $2 million vacuum distillation equipment to remove the alcohol without heat so that we could maintain the live microorganisms that are in kombucha that provide the health benefits, and sell it as a non-alcoholic product. So suddenly I became a distiller, even though I was intending to be a non-alcoholic beverage producer. We had to get a distilling license, we had to get a brewing license, and a major byproduct of our process is now alcohol. So for every single bottle of kombucha I make, we take 2 nips of 18% alcohol off. So I have a massive supply of this byproduct that I can't sell very easily. We tried initially to take that alcohol and turn it into a spirit. We partnered with a local craft distillery and we made a vodka that we sold through the DLC. Problem was that my company brand recognition is not in the liquor store, it's in the grocery store. And so there was no benefit for me using my brand to try to sell a new product and compete in a space that is highly, highly competitive and takes a lot of money to build awareness, especially selling a vodka product. So we had to shelf that idea and find a new road to market if we wanted to play in the adult beverage space. And as we saw seltzers emerging on the market and people looking for better for you ways to imbibe in the evening, we decided to do a hard kombucha. Now, unfortunately, I'm not able to take this exact same alcohol that I've extracted from my non-alcoholic and add it to the product to make a hard kombucha because it's classified as a distilled spirit now once I've used this machine. So we had to invent an entirely new process to figure out how to manufacture hard kombucha. It involved microbiologists and brewers, and I had to get new classifications of production to make this product and bring it to market. So I'm still haven't found a way to monetize this alcohol that I'm creating every day. We're probably one of the bigger distillers in the state, but nobody knows it because we're not selling it. This low alcohol beverage law would allow me to take this spirit that I'm pulling off every day that comes out at about 16% ABV and to use it in products and sell it on a much larger scale than I could selling it through the DLC. And not only that, but I would be able to use it for co-packing. That same alcohol would be purchased by producers to be used as an ingredient that we could use to help fill our space down here in Middlebury and reach capacity. So I strongly urge you to consider this. It would be a major benefit to my company, to the Vermont landscape. Right now, we're handicapped economically by having to follow to a T the regulations that exist. And you know, it's kind of funny that these two products, the only difference is that the alcohol has been removed, but I had to ferment more alcohol to sell this one instead of being able to use the alcohol that I already have. So it's an interesting case of trying to work around policies and regulations. And I used to have hair before this all started, so it's been very stressful. Thank you for your time today. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. So I have a question for Claire. So Mike's Hard Lemonade, that's allowed to be sold in a grocery store now?
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, currently anything that's malt-based or wine-based, as long as it's below 16% ABV, that is sold in a grocery store. So when you walk into a grocery store today, you're going to see the Trulies and, you know, there's a whole huge range of these products. They would all be malt or vinous-based products.
I see. Okay.
And-
So the basic thrust of this bill is to, right now, Liquor and Lottery is the sole entity that could sell these alcohol-based products, and for, I guess, low content alcohol, you want to change the law to allow them to be sold more like wine and beer in
Right.
convenience stores. Okay.
And I believe the alcohol percent is the same as high alcohol beer. Is that right?
That's correct. It's 16%. That's the same amount for wine, beer, and we would add this category, low alcohol spirits. It would be up to 16%. That's the level that grocery stores can currently sell today.
Right. So it's not creating a new standard for grocery stores. It's just selling up to what's currently allowed.
Did you get any opportunity to testify in the House on this?
Well, we are going to have an opportunity and have been invited next Wednesday to testify on the exact identical bill that has been introduced in the House.
But nothing this year to date, though.
Not to date. I think when they did this H313, they were squeezed for time, but we
Right.
were told that they would take testimony, later in the session, and we're on the schedule for next Wednesday.
But that sort of, if we decided to put this on to 313, they would have had the runway. They would have been preparing and hearing testimony on this already.
Okay. So who from the department wants to testify on this proposal? I understand there's some concern. I don't know if it goes beyond the financial concern, but we need to hear from the department on this. Commissioner?
Oh, thank you, Senator Sorokin. Really, what I'd like to share with the committee is that this bill has the support of the administration. And with that thought in mind, I'll really restrict my commentary to suggest that we support the administration and therefore support the bill.
Okay, there was it's surprising testimony, but can you comment on the concern that was raised on the fees to liquor and lottery? How does that work? How does it affect your budget? Have you done any runs on that? I assume we would need to hear from the Joint Fiscal Office to get a fiscal note on this.
I'm not certain that'll be necessary, Senator. I can quantify the financial loss to the department based on the current level of volume. That is about $300,000 in net revenue. I think it's important to recognize, as Ms. Buckley pointed out, that the distilled spirit-based products have always been treated separately and regulated as such. And this is a change in policy. I believe the governor feels the trends in the industry are supportive of the expansion of retail points of distribution for products of distilled spirit-based ready-to-drink cocktails. I would suggest that the department continues to have a concern regarding the ceiling for alcohol content. We don't consider 16% to be low alcohol in any stretch of the imagination. I would be inclined to suggest the department would prefer a lower ABV be established to the low alcohol products. And we don't really have a significant interest in being a parallel path for the category. From our standpoint, we're either in or out. We're not interested in selling PET, plastic, or glass. We're interested in the category as a whole. So if you choose to allow the private sector to retail low alcohol products, I would suggest you might want to consider the ABV limit and also understand that the department doesn't have any ongoing interest in competing with the private sector for this business.
So on the ADV, is that the term ADV?
I'm sorry, alcohol by volume, ABV.
ABV, okay.
Excuse me. Yes.
I understand you might want to see a lower number there, but is the number that's being suggested in this bill the same that is allowed for beer and wine presently?
In the vinous category, anything above 16%, regardless of the source, malt or vinous, are considered distilled spirits by the federal government.
Okay, so why would we distinguish for this product if we're allowing beer and wine to be sold in convenience stores that could go up to ABVs of 16%.
Well, basically, the point historically has been the source of alcohol. If it's arrived at their distillation, it's categorized and handled differently. That's why we see beer and wine retailed in standard retail, where spirits are retailed by the department. Spirit-based products have always been treated differently by both the federal government and the state government. What we're contemplating here is creating a carve-out for these so-called low alcohol beverage products and considering taking them out of the historical state control channel and putting them into the private sector distribution channel, just like beer and wine.
Right, but I'm not sure you're answering the question.
I apologize.
Why have a different percent? If you're going to make that move, why is there a reason why the percentages would be different? The ABVs would be different.
Well, our concern is that the RTD, ready to drink cocktails, are basically attractive to entry level consumers. They tend to be fruity, they tend to be sweet, they tend to be carbonated. And we have some concerns about access to minors. We have some concerns about focus on marketing to young consumers. Basically, the ABV issue really is somewhat arbitrary. As I mentioned, it's historically been based on the source of alcohol. I think this conversation is looking to circumvent that. So let's just say that it's arbitrary or to some degree, common sense.
Is there, you use several times the word historically. Distilled alcoholic beverages have been more in the purview of the state sales and regulation than beer and wine. And is there a reason other than historic reasons that still apply why I mean, I can understand if you had like 40 or 100 proof whiskey, you might want to have greater control and limitations on access. But if we're going to have a percentage of volume at whether it's 10%, 16%, whatever it is, are there other reasons other than historic reasons why we should continue to make this distinction between distilled products and beer and wine?
Well, that's a very good question. I would like to speak to the reason why distilled spirits have been handled differently than wine or brewed beverages. It's really a function of alcohol content. When prohibition was repealed, when states were empowered to create their own laws, they looked at distilled spirits, obviously as a concentrated type of beverage alcohol, as more problematic because it didn't take as much consumption to create a level of impairment. That basically was the basis for handling the three tiers differently. Alcohol content, the higher the level of alcohol content, the greater level of control. That applies to relaxed standard for wine, but compared to beer, there's more regulations and controls. I hope that gives you some idea of the historical perspective, if you will, and how these laws were set up 80 years ago. And they, for all intents and purposes, still exist for a reason. And but again, Senator, I hope that answers your question. If not, I'd be happy to respond to a repost question.
I think it does answer my question, is that if it's based on the percentage of alcohol content, we've got a new world out here with a low alcohol content. So there may be need to modernize the law and still stay true to the historic reasons behind it. I wish I'd made a a copy of it. I came across an article just by chance a few days ago, and this was coming up, and I should have kept it or remember where I got it from, but it really, what was it?
I bet we can find it.
Yeah, it was an article that was talking about a new burgeoning world of low alcohol distilled products, that they were now moving from the 6 or 8% to much higher percentages and finding a real strong market for it. And that is of a little concern to me, with that is happening right now. And we may be on the cusp of opening the doors to products that really haven't been out there but are coming. So are there, maybe this question is for Ken or Claire, are there distilled products at 16% being sold in liquor stores presently?
Yes, there are. I think the category we're referring to right now, ready to drink cocktails, we do in fact have products listed in that category that are in the 16 to 25% ABV range. So yes, we do in fact sell those, but that in our case is a bit of an anomaly, quite honestly. The vast majority of our products have ABV of 40% or above, which is 80 proof, and that pretty much is, to most categories, unless it's a flavored product, is a pretty much standard ABV range. Now, I'd like to just, if I may, clarify the interest in RTDs. As Ms. Buckley pointed out, there has been a tremendous interest in what are referred to as flavored malt beverages, and those are malt-based products. Malt beverages have essentially sustained the gross volume of the beer industry over the past year. Beer was down 10% nationally. Malt beverages were up 9.1%. The category was flat. So all the growth in the beer business is in flavored malt beverages. Distilled spirits manufacturers, they want to get in that game. So everybody's coming up with the bourbon and Coke, the gin tonic, and certainly there's a lot of innovation and dynamics in the beverage alcohol and beverage industry in general. So to your point, what is the trend in the industry? Should Vermont be progressive in addressing retail opportunities? Again, I think the administration feels there's a compelling reason to support the bill because of those reasons, and that's kind of where the department stands at this point.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions at this point? Could you, Claire,
I'd like, if I could.
just before I get
Yeah.
to you, Senator Clarkson, could you just get us some names and pictures perhaps, and percentage of alcohol of the big products nationwide in this area? Because I'm having a lot of problems relating to what we're talking about here. I know there's this White Claw or something, and then I hear about Mike's Lemonade. I don't know where these things are, but it'd be good to get a couple of pages of examples of these products.
I'd be happy to do that, Senator. On your webpage, I did put a one pager on there, and I have a picture of just 3 of them, but happy to get you the list, what you're asking for.
Thank you.
Yeah, but thank you, Claire. We'll take a peek at that.
Okay.
I'm just,
Senator Clarkson.
yeah, no, I mean, I know we're going to discuss this and I'd like to think about it because I think it actually has parallels to other bills that have been sent to our committee, and the concern about, I think that Patrick's concern about creating further access, tempting access, flavored access, easier to access stuff for minors is not something to dismiss completely. And so I'm wondering if there are plans for how we market these and where we market them in grocery stores. Wine is sort of 12 to 14% by volume, and it's, usually in its own section and is not particularly, it's so not marketed to young people particularly. But these products, I'm just concerned with where these products would be in a grocery store. And if they were in with the seltzers, that would be easy to mistake them. I mean, so I think that that's one of the questions we might have going forward is how they're marketed, where they're positioned in a grocery store or a convenience store, so that they are not mistaken for something that a minor might be tempted by.
What, just briefly before we wrap up, Commissioner, what is the experience and the difference other than financial in terms of enforcement or compliance? I mean, do you see, I don't know how else to answer this, but if you, in one of your outlets for liquor and lottery, for the liquor department, one of those licensed outlet that sells alcohol and beer and wine versus a convenience store that sends beer and wine, is there more scrutiny over people who shouldn't be buying that just because they're more sensitized or have more to lose if they violate the law?
I would be inclined to respond by saying that I don't really foresee any significant compliance and enforcement challenges. I would be inclined to suggest it's business as usual relative to focus on agencies versus non-agencies. From an enforcement standpoint, there is no significant difference, but on a retail coordinator standpoint, we spend a great deal of time directly working with our agents in every aspect of their business. And we do manage that category with a great deal of focus. And so enforcement wise, it's really not a game changer. In terms of retail coordinator exposure for the department, it's not really a game changer either. If it's not on our shelf, it's on somebody else's shelf, then we still have our job to do, and we'll continue managing our store within the store.
So you set the prices for alcohol in a licensed liquor store, but in that same store where they sell beer and wine, the prices for those beer and wines are set by the store itself, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. Let's take a 15-minute break. We'll come back at 9:45. I don't want to cut anybody off. If somebody had a questions or a comment, Ken Albert, welcome. Could you tell me exactly on what part of 313 you were hoping to testify on?
Oh, thank you. Good morning. Section 256, which is a very small section of 313 about promotional tastings. And that almost passed in the last session and was dropped off because of all the complications with other probably more weighty issues. But this promotional tasting is a very small thing. Up till this point in time, we're required to notify, I believe, 48 hours in advance anytime we would be sampling wines at a given restaurant. I'm a manufacturer. When we're sampling wines at a restaurant or a retail store, and it's a very cumbersome thing to do. It sort of really impedes our potential for selling our products. And I understand that the commissioner is in agreement and supports this particular position.
Yes.
And so we hope this one does survive this session.
Okay.
Just if I may make a comment, I don't have any horse in the distilled products that you're discussing, but my impression is these are understood by the public to be sort of light alcohol products, and having something at 16% in that category there, might actually blindside some of the consumers, as well as be a potential weapon. So, there's a lot of those products that are, I guess, below 6% alcohol. And that's a very different kind of drink than something that's at 14%.
How much is wine generally?
Wine is between 12 and actually up to 16%. Most wines are between 12 and 13%. We have some wines. We can't control that. It depends on how much sugar they're harvested with. We have some wines that are 15.5, close to 16%. And that's a natural occurrence with wines, and maybe also thanks to global warming, more and more wines are like that.
Okay. Well, thank you. We did hear from the commissioner on that section, and he was supportive of it. And I don't think we had concerns in our committee about that. So thank
No,
you. Thank you.
we just
Thank you
didn't have time to do it last year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's in this year. I mean,
Thank you, Ken. Okay, let's come back at 9:45, please.